Hello and welcome to the Discover History YouTube channel, and this evening what we're going to do is take another look at the road to the Battle of Worcester that was eventually fought on the 3rd of September 1651. Now if you have a look through our playlist, we've now actually set up a separate chapter or a separate column or separate entry for the Battle of Worcester. The main reason for doing this is the fact that Worcester plays a very important part in the Civil War. In particular, it sees the first clash of arms that was fought on the 23rd of September 1642, and we also see the last battle of the Civil War, the one that we're talking about at the moment, that was fought on the 3rd of September 1651. So if you click on that playlist, you will get all the videos that we're doing in the run-up to the Battle of Worcester. Now, our last video looked at the fact that Charles left Stirling on the 31st of July and started his momentous march down to London. The main reason for that is because technically he knew Oliver Cromwell and the New Model Army was in Scotland, so thought the best course of action was make a speedy march down into London and retake his father's throne. That's the Charles I, the man who was executed in 1649. So Charles left Stirling at the end of July and started weaving all the way through the lowlands of Scotland from Stirling, heading towards the border with England. Well, interestingly, on the 6th of August, so today in 1651, Charles's army begins crossing the border, and he actually crosses the border around about Carlisle. So what we have is this man, a very young Charles, technically the figurehead of the army, but really the commanding of the army goes down to a man called the Duke of Hamilton. But there are problems. Remember what I said in an earlier video. The leadership within that army are all arguing amongst themselves. There is one particular English commander that hopes that when they cross the border and march down to London, that the command will then go from Hamilton to him, and that's really down to the fact that he thinks if he's leading an army into England, he should be the commander of it, not a Scottish person. And if you remember back to the video, previous video, these are the men that's making their way south. So today in 1651, it's these men that are crossing into England at Carlisle, which is technically an all-out declaration for war, because what you have to remember is in 1651, as it had been for a very, very long time, Scotland was very much a separate country from England. Yes, it was joined to England, but really it was a completely different country. So when a Scottish army crosses the border into England, it's an all-right declaration of war. So the Civil War ended really in 1649 with the execution of Charles I. The earlier Civil War ended in 1646, but now there is an outright declaration. An army of around about 10,000 men are now marching into the north of England. They've crossed at Carlisle. Now, the best book I will draw your attention to, almost the Bible, in fact, for the Civil War in Worcestershire, has to be this fantastic book that was written by an antiquarian and historian called Willis Bund. And this is the famous book known as The Civil War in Worcestershire, and as you can see from the front cover, the Scotch Invasion. And that's what you have to remember. This isn't a royalist army as such. This is a Scottish invading army led by one of the royal family. Now, what happened when it did cross the border? Well, some people, some old Englishmen, would have seen him as a member of the royal family and therefore thought they would follow him. And we know for a fact there were some people, a small handful of people in the north of England, that actually declared that Charles was the king. Now, technically, he doesn't have a full coronation until 1660, which is why if you look through most books about monarchs in this country or look through posters showing a list of monarchs, really most of the time Charles is shown to be the monarch from 1660. The restored monarchy. He's the first king of that restored monarchy. However, at a place called Scone in Scotland, Charles actually had a ceremony of sorts. Now, there's a lot of debate on whether it was a full coronation or not. Personally, I don't think it was a full coronation. So really, he was declared as being King of the Scots and declared king by some Englishmen, but technically he was not king. What you have to remember is after the execution of his father, or as he said, the murder of his father in 1649, the monarchy didn't exist at all, really. It's interesting that when Charles is eventually restored to the throne in 1660, he actually asked the government, Parliament, to backdate his monarchy. He actually states that I should be declared as the king from 1649 all the way through. But it's interesting, most books in that will always say Charles II, King Charles II, 1660 onwards, basically. So if you do ever get a chance, do find this book, The Civil War in Worcestershire. The best thing is, like I said, is that comment about the Civil War in Worcestershire and the Scotch invasion, because really this is not technically a royalist army. This is a Scottish invading army with a handful of Englishmen. So today, the 6th of August 1651, Charles is now crossed into England at a place called Carlisle. They will now continue the march south. Some people are declaring him as king, like I said. Some people are thinking, well, maybe he is going to be successful at the end of the day. The Parliament army predominantly in Scotland, and they're nowhere in sight at the moment. So is the road open down to London? But it's funny, there was also a lot of people that were against this invading army, because like I said, this is purely an invading army from Scotland. People did fear their land. They thought they would be looted, they would have their houses burned. If you look back in history, Scottish invasions were usually quite horrific affairs, very much like English invasions of Scotland, really. So there was a lot of fearful people. There was also some very angry people that thought, why are we starting another civil war? We were at peace and we've now got another war looming, and where is this big battle going to take place? We've had the Battle of Dunbar on the 3rd of September 1650. Where will the next battle be? Now, the other interesting thing to say is some historians, even just after the Civil War, and some people during the Civil War, did actually say, when we look at Charles leaving Scotland to march on London, should we really think of him as a man heading to his coronation, or should we think of him as a man fleeing the might of the new model army in Scotland? It's quite an interesting debate. Like anything with social media, please comment, because we would like to hear what you think. Do you think Charles was marching down to London for his great coronation, or was he actually fleeing the might of Oliver Cromwell in the new model army in Scotland? Let's get into England, maybe. So do debate, comment on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, or just comment on here. Please make sure you subscribe, and if you have not liked Discover History on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, please make sure you do. Also, make sure you share these posts, because we want to be seen as far as we can be, because this is an interesting story that should be told. Anyway, on that note, stay safe and we'll see you soon. Bye bye.